Well guys, this could be a long one, so don't say I didn't warn you. As some will know, the government finally released a paper yesterday that they said they would on group-based CSE, despite the Independent claiming it was a government U-turn, which obviously it wasn't. The full report is not being released as the petitions have demanded, so no U-turn by the government this time. The Independent also said these scumbags came from diverse backgrounds, which may in part be true, if you look broadly at CSE, but when you go into group-based, the majority being diverse is not the name I would give it, let me tell you. I mean, I'm sure you can all smell the diversity coming off this lot. Such a diverse bunch of faces, you couldn't pick out one arsehole's heritage from the next. Now, The Guardian, as some of you will know from my short video last night, did some statistical gymnastics and data cherry picking that the government would be proud of, so they could blame white people for this. The Independent's article was almost as bad as The Guardian's, but stopped short of headlining it as The Guardian did. The paper itself is no better, being a complete shit show from the start though. Them explaining the so-called experts who helped them name the ERG or Expert Research Group is a clusterfuck in its own right, so let's start with some of that. It says, during the development of this paper, members of the ERG have generously provided ongoing written and verbal guidance to the Home Office on its content and findings. The group met online 3 times to discuss iterations of the paper. The ERG's comments have proved invaluable in shaping it into a document that sets out the full extent of our current collective knowledge on this topic, as well as setting direction for areas of future work. The ERG had an advisory role in the development of this paper, and as such, all comments from the ERG were considered carefully, but not all were taken on board. The final paper is ultimately a Home Office product and does not reflect the position of all ERG members. Throughout their discussions, ERG members were clear that group-based CSE is an important issue that warrants significant government attention. However, they recognise that this is a complex and nuanced area. There is nothing nuanced about raping kids and the powers that be failing to deal with it, so they can fuck right off with that one there. The group recognised, it said, the difficulties in defining group-based CSE, particularly as a form of abuse that is distinct from other types of CSE and child sexual abuse more generally. No, that is pretty simple. If it is groups of people on industrial scales doing it multiple times to multiple people, it's easily defined as group-based because it's not just one lone sicko doing it. Fucking experts, they claim, must be experts in everything but common sense and the blindingly obvious. It goes on though, the group agreed that these definitional changes contribute to the lack of robust research and data in the public domain on group-based CSE. Yeah, because the government, police and everyone in positions of power to get the information out there cover it up, possibly to cover their own arses. It goes on though, it was highlighted that much of the evidence available now is quite old and therefore is unlikely to represent current thinking and understanding of group-based CSE. Are these people having a fucking laugh? The same has been occurring for over 2 decades that you have evidence of and are still arresting people for to this day, so the evidence is more than damning and current, as is the thinking behind it. Talk about whitewashing, explaining the people they got in to whitewash the report. I would say it's incredible, but the imbeciles at the Home Office have the intelligence of a grapefruit and think we would actually buy into this shit. It says the ERG was broadly supportive of the aims of this paper in trying to achieve a rounded picture of the nature of offending with a mix of data, research and more illustrative detail from cases, studies and local reviews. And by broadly supportive, do they mean some people in the panel support covering it up? Can I ask why they are involved if they want it covered up? It hardly inspires trust in the report or paper, does it? Let's be honest. But then again, you can have no trust in this paper anyway because they didn't just release the report as they should have. All information should be out on the table for the public to see. This is a fucking given. It goes on further down though. The intention of the work that informed this paper was to improve understanding of the characteristics of offending, including ethnicity, but placing this in the understanding of the context of the experiences of victims and survivors has been a central consideration throughout. While ethnicity and religion, or the victim's lack of a certain one, should be the most important factor if the victims are all the central consideration, because most will share a common theme, as we all know. Being either white or just not Muslim appears to be the perpetrator's only consideration. So to focus on the victims, you would need to focus on that, which of course this whitewash piece of crap won't do, as it states here. Members of the ERG suggested that the best way to reflect this emphasis in the paper would be to describe who is affected by child sexual exploitation and their experiences, including direct quotes. So they will focus on the victim's effects, not why it happened or why the people doing it did it in concert with others, driving them around different towns to do it for fuck's sake, and even throwing them out half naked out of cars while driving down the fucking street. This shit is really pissing me off, and we are not even into the report findings yet. yet. But the final bit on this Whitewash group reads, the ERG also did not reach a consensus how the evidence should be presented, particularly with regards to cultural and community context. While this has been a central consideration both in the development of the paper and the research that informed it, the available evidence is weak and robust data is scarce. Fuck your cover-ups to protect these people's cultural and community feelings. Earlier you said it was important to focus on victims and make sure that it doesn't happen again. There is plenty of evidence there and it should be presented in full as it is. Let it bitch slap a few people with some hard facts and expose them for covering it up. Of course though, that is a fantasy land to think that they would ever do that. It was never going to happen. Covering shit up is like breathing to those in power. It literally comes naturally. But it continues. Some, but not all, members of the group wanted to see more explicit detail on manifestations of group-based CSE when perpetrated by offenders from certain communities, particularly Pakistani communities, given the involvement of Pakistani ethnic offenders in a number of high-profile cases and the recognised need for specific responses to specific threats. Some people on the panel at least wanted in-depth detail on what the actual fuck is going on around the country, but many others it appears did not, so they really didn't bother. This shows that it's a pure whitewash, plain and simple. Now we will take a look in a minute at the list involved and try to see who might have been pushing for what should have been happening anyway in relation to all cases of child grooming, regardless of where the scumbags doing it are from. But the Home Office said in finalising the paper we have sought to be as specific as we can despite the lack of evidence available on cultural drivers in particular. Which I would have to say, once again, fuck off. They must think we are all stupid. There is plenty of evidence, as I have said, the cultural drivers are well known and have already been stated in this video. They are either white or just not Muslim when it comes to cultural drivers for the victims in the high profile cases and simply being sick pedo cunts in the others. It's not exactly rocket science for fuck's sake, is it? And they finish up that bit with, we are profoundly grateful to the members of the ERG for the time and thought that they have contributed to the development of this paper. What they mean there is they are grateful for helping them whitewash the shit out of it. Personally, I think it's incredible, and like I said, that is not even the report, just them explaining bits about who actually helped them make it. The findings of the report are just as bad and even more vague, despite this costing us tens of millions of pounds. All we get is downplayed bullshit papers with the substance of Jeremy Corbyn's new peace and justice project. It is actually laughable how bad this paper is because it provides no answers to anything and just scoots around topics that should be investigated more. So essentially, exactly what we expected. One part of it we will take a quick look at though is their key findings on ethnicity, because this should be a hoot, especially after The Guardian's article yesterday. It says law enforcement data can be particularly vulnerable to bias in terms of those cases that come to the attention of the authorities, and this can impact on the generalizability of such data, essentially saying the police are racist and arrest brown people. It seems truly pathetic shit from the Home Office there, and a blatant cop-out if you ask me. Next up they say this can lead to greater attention being paid to certain types of offenders, making that data more readily identified and recorded. Which obviously, no, when the police arrest you, they take your details, including ethnicity. That data is there for all crimes, including grooming gangs. What sort of an excuse for skirting around ethnicity is that when they report you over the radio as an IC1 or IC3 male, before asking you in custody what ethnicity you are? Next up it says police collected data on ethnicity uses broad categories and requires the police to assign an ethnicity rather than that being self-reported by the offenders. Data is therefore not always accurate. No, the ethnicity is asked to you by the fucking custody sergeant when they take you in there. Berlowitz et al. 2012 observed cases of offenders being initially classed as Asian, but actually coming from other backgrounds such as white British or Afghan. Yeah, because white British and Afghan are so fucking similar, ain't they? The fuck are wrong with these people? And someone observed anecdotal cases of a police officer getting it wrong on the street, but when asked in custody, this was corrected, so the information on ethnicity is obviously there because we've been told they were either white British or Afghan. The fuck are these people even on? They must think we are really stupid. Also, I'm sure the media would lump an Afghan groomer in the Asian groups as we have seen before. They don't call them Afghan grooming gangs or even Muslim grooming gangs. Asian is what they call them. Actually, a group of Sikh campaigners won a court battle against the media doing that, so I will cover that soon, don't worry. But as we expected, and like I have said before, this report is not worth the time it took to write it. They did the bare minimum and skirted around anything that might be remotely important, despite, as I said, some wanting to actually look deeper into it. Now, to finish up this video, we will look at the people who helped the Home Office whitewash this and try to figure out who might have wanted a deeper look into the Pakistani rape gangs that, if it was the other way around, would be considered a hate crime, as you all know. So here is the full list of external reference group members, and they are Chief Constable Simon Bailey, QPM, National Police Chiefs Council Lead on Child Protection. Dr. Helen Beckett, Director of the International Centre Researching Child Sexual Exploitation, Violence and Trafficking at the University of Bedfordshire. Sarah Champion, Labour MP and Member of Parliament for Rotherham. Rosina Cottage, QC, Barrister, QC and Member of the Sentencing Council. Donald Finlatter, Director of Stop It Now, Lucy Faithfull Foundation. Imran Khan MP, Member of Parliament for Wakefield. Dr. Sophie Laws, Deputy Director Research and Evaluation Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse. Anne Longfield, Children's Commissioner for England. Next up is Faye Maxted, CEO, The Survivors Trust. Then we have Trevor Pearce, CBE, Chair of UK Anti-Doping, previously Director General of the National Crime Squad and the Serious Organised Crime Agency. We also have Sheila Taylor, MBE, CEO of NWG Network. And finally, Sammy Woodhouse, child sexual abuse survivor and campaigner, who most of you will actually know. Now, I have to say that is a rather piss-poor list of people that should be there. Obviously, Sammy Woodhouse is going to be the only one with any right to really be there. The rest of them, if you ask me, are just as likely to be responsible for covering it all up in the first place as they are getting it out. So to have them dealing with a paper is literally just the Home Office pissing in our pocket and telling us it's raining. Now, I expect many of you like me are seriously disappointed that only Sammy Woodhouse is there representing the victims, but I'm not really surprised in the slightest. I also expect that it was her leading those who wanted more investigations into what the fuck has been going on. As we expected though, it leaves more questions than it answers, and ignores basic common sense to skirt around a lot of the crimes and try to generalise all of it. If you ask me, the whole thing was a waste of money and time, while thousands of kids are still preyed on by scumbags all over the country, and they will continue to do so. No doubt with the powers that be covering it up, and whenever it gets called out, we end up with piss poor papers like this. I will link the full paper down in the description if you really want to go and read it, but it's a complete waste of time.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.